it's very important that at a time when we're going to be driving real productivity across so many different industries, that we don't lose sight of the fact that, the customer experience can't be, forgotten about. It has to be actually at the forefront of ensuring that this technology makes the experience better, not just cheaper, faster.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Ryan Snyder. Ryan is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Thermo Fisher Scientific, a roughly $40 billion revenue company that's a world leader in servicing science. Ryan has been with the company for 11 years since it acquired his prior company, Life Technologies. He's been the Chief Information Officer since 2019. Ryan's a big believer of weaving tech and digital strategy into the business strategy, and as such, sharing ownership of topics like data and analytics and artificial intelligence. Having spent a meaningful chunk of his career at GE, he's also a process expert who thinks deeply about the broader implications of trends before acting on them. I look forward to hearing more about the direction he's pointing his department and his company through this conversation. Ryan, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Great to be here, Peter.
Hey, Ryan, I thought we'd begin with Thermo Fisher Scientific, your company. I thought you might be able to take a moment and provide an overview as to the business you're in.
Yeah, thanks. So Thermo Fisher Scientific, we are the world leader in serving science, right? That's the core of what we do. It's just north of $40 billion in revenue. It's a global company. It's a great mission, right? It's one that I love, and it's one that I think when you think about a lot of people who join our organization, they tend to want to stay here. Our mission is we enable our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. And so we really lean into that enablement aspect of it. Our customer success is our success. So we're a supplier of products and services really for the entirety of the life sciences industry. So think about large pharma, biotech, government, academia. Anybody trying to further science is a consumer of our tools and services.
That's a great background. I appreciate you sharing that. And an interesting mission, as you point out. Talk a bit about your background and role, your purview as Chief Information Officer, if you would.
Yeah, so I've been with the organization for, I just passed my 20-year anniversary. So that was exciting. That was in November of this past year. I've been the Chief Information Officer of the organization since 2019. So a fair amount of time now to steward the technology decisions for the organization. It's been a great journey. I've worked in a number of the different business units within the organization leading up to this role, and I've moved around quite a bit, but I have found my home here in cold Boston, Massachusetts, as it stands right now, standing here in February.
And can you describe a bit more about kind of what's within your purview, how what the role entails?
Absolutely. So it's a large organization, right? And so given the diversity of all the things that we do end to end, the business is structured in a way where it all works together. So certainly there's a method to bringing all these different businesses that we've acquired over the years together. But there's a lot of very strong, I'll say, relatively independent P&L. So we're a division-led organization. And so the way my organization has evolved and has been structured is we have very strong IT leaders that sit and are partners with each of the different general managers across the organization. So that has been a real staple of really being connected in with our business partners. And then at the corporate level, some things you might expect where we have infrastructure, cybersecurity, enterprise applications, our global digital commerce team, as well as more recently, we've brought together our automation, our AI, and our data teams together under one leader to be a shared service for all of our divisions trying to advance our digital technologies, including software throughout our products and service capabilities. So it's been a fun evolution. It's one that never stops changing, right? I often describe our function as it's a function in motion, right? It just doesn't stand still.
Yeah, very. And I know from our past conversations, Ryan, that you're a big believer that technology strategy and business strategy have to be woven together. Talk a bit about that insight and the way in which that's realized in an organization like yours.
Yeah, I think it's one where you constantly have to monitor this, right? Because on one end, if the function takes too much ownership of the technology, you end up with a result where a lot of the technology advancements become little science experiments off in a back corner, right? Where it becomes kind of an IT thing and it's separate from actually the core of what your business is sitting around the table talking about, trying to solve customer problems. But on the reverse, of course, is you end up with, the proverbial shadow IT where all of it essentially is now being driven and inside of the business with no real stakeholder alignment to the function. So what we try to do is structurally, we have, parts of our organization that really sit at every part of that, right? Whether it's the people in IT who are directly sitting inside of the business and sitting around the table talking about strategies, to the teams that are more, I'll say, enablers on the back end, who are kind of looking for efficiencies and trying to drive, scale when we deploy technology across the organization. So I think it is important that you have kind of leaders who understand how to do both of those different pieces of it. And that's where I think the magic can happen, so to speak, when the deployments really drive benefit for the company.
That's fantastic. And you noted the extent to which you have leaders who are embedded with the general managers of each of the businesses themselves. And no doubt that facilitates it as well. It sounds, you correct me if I'm wrong, does that mean they have sort of a foot in each of those businesses as well as a foot in IT and offer sort of translation and advice and in both directions along the way?
Yeah, it can be a bit of a time overhead, right? Because oftentimes those individuals have to sit on two staffs, right? So you're supporting both a business strategy as well as aligning up to a technology strategy through my office. But that is the model, and by and large, it works. I think and we try to rotate people throughout the organization as much as we can without being disruptive, because I do think the diversity of thinking, as you can get, ultimately is also critical when you're thinking about how do you solve problems at these different points of the scientific workflow, as well as just the diversity of being a back office IT person versus being somebody who's more embedded with the business. I think getting the empathy on both sides of those struggles is also, really paramount, because where I see it break down is you get divisions between those two parts of the organization, and they stop working really hand in hand, and inefficiency creeps in.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that your thought process about the necessity for technology and the rest of the organization to be woven together also provides some interesting insights into how you think about data. That many believe this to be a tech led, owned subject, and I'd love to have you talk a bit about the way in which you think about this a little bit differently.
At the end of the day, right, we're in the middle of a true incredible opportunity with artificial intelligence, and the technology is moving quickly, right? It's gone from hardware to software in the matter of just a year. But at the core of that, underneath it all, is your data, right? And I think every single organization is waking up to the fact that it's going to be very important for them to understand what data do they have, what data don't they have, and where's the value in that data in terms of driving a competitive advantage, or potentially creating new native solutions with technology to support their customer base. And so that idea of really understanding your data, it can't just fall to the IT organization, right? And I think that's I'll say the mistake that can happen is, somebody essentially says, IT, go clean up that data. Many times the IT organization really isn't the right team to really have a clear understanding contextually of what good data means, right? And so it's that partnership and creating roles and creating organizational constructs where you start to think about data as product. You're going to need people actually that are real experts, subject matter experts on the business utility. And then you need the architects and the subject matter experts around, what does clean data really look like? And how do we advance getting, acquiring additional data points for the organization. I think having that construct set up in a way where both the business and the technology functions feel like they have joint ownership of things, to me is incredibly important. And again, it's one of those things where you never get it exactly right, but when it's not working, and you just have to put the monitors in place to make sure that you're stepping in and constantly, shepherding that as a leader.
Yeah, well said. Very interesting. I love that perspective and ensuring that there's that partnership and everyone is weighing in essence, as opposed to it being more siloed within one organization. You mentioned as you were talking about your purview and your team that you have brought together automation, AI, and data all under one leader and offered it as a shared service for the rest of the organization. Very interesting. And I wanted to double click on that point a little bit further, especially now that we've broached the topic of both data and artificial intelligence. Talk a bit about the rationale between bringing the three of those together.
Yeah, Peter, we saw the opportunity, which, by the way, everybody did, that generative AI is going to be truly a transformational, to use one of the most overused words, technology. But if you kind of look in your rearview mirror, we've been having a lot of these transformational technologies come and sometimes stay and sometimes go. So the way that I thought about it was, it's important that when you create an organization, that if you're a general manager and you're looking to drive real value through digital throughout your organization, you don't want one tool constantly at the forefront being kind of advocated for, so to speak, to say, I don't know what the problem is, but I'm pretty sure the solution is going to be X, right? And I feel like right now you could run into that danger when it comes to generative AI. And so the way we viewed it was a cocktail of generative AI, more traditional AI and machine learning, all of it underpinned by data, as well as some of the capabilities that have come about in the last 5-10 years or so around automation. If you bring all of that together, it will create an organizational construct where I feel like the individuals that come out of that team have the opportunity to pick the right tool to fix the problem, or drive a process improvement or what have you, that the business needs, versus kind of coming in and, if you will, more in an advocacy role. So that's the concern. So if you will, it's the old pick the right tool to solve the problem, and the solution comes about much faster.
Yeah, keen insight. Again, really interesting to hear how you think about that and the necessity to ensure that not a single tool is offered. With regard to artificial intelligence, you've mentioned to me in the past that you have a 3-pillar approach to this, and I wondered if you could maybe highlight those 3 pillars and with a description as to each of them as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're mine. I'd say they're the company's. From our CEO all the way through the company leadership team, the way we've advanced the thinking for Thermo Fisher is, as you mentioned, there's 3 real opportunities, right? So one is, I would say, to make the company run better. There's a lot of exciting, deployments that are already taking place in terms of finding efficiencies. The opportunity with AI to kind of summarize documents, as well as find information faster to create kind of an assistant along the way to make all of us more productive day to day. How do you bring that from an individual all the way through and scale that across the organization is certainly an exciting opportunity to make our company, and frankly, probably every company wants to deploy this to make themselves run more efficiently. We also look at 2 other lenses. One is around the actual products and services we bring forward. So, we think about the products that we've had for years that have been used by scientists in their labs. Increasingly, it's not just the hardware, it's software and firmware that runs on those machines. And if you look at the opportunity that AI presents, it's super exciting to advance the productivity needs that our customers are looking for. And then on the service side, likewise, we offer clinical trial services as well as manufacturing services. So tremendous opportunities to reduce the amount of time that those services ultimately take to get the customers to the answers they need faster, which is, at the end of the day, what they're looking to do. And then finally and perhaps the one I'm most excited about, is the customer experience, right? And I feel like it's very important that at a time when we're going to be driving real productivity across so many different industries that we don't lose sight of the fact that, the customer experience can't be, forgotten about. It has to be actually at the forefront of ensuring that this technology makes the experience better, not just cheaper, faster. So we're very focused on that when we think about how our customers interact with a company like Thermo Fisher.
I love that point, and I would love to maybe go explore that a little bit further as well. I love the insight that, as companies focus on making the company run better, they may make choices that impede progress from an employee experience, but also customer experience perspective. What are some of the ways in which you ensure that isn't lost, beyond just recognizing it, which is the first step? How do you engage the employee base and customer base in ways to ensure that their experiences are factored in?
It really is about governance. And that's something that, people say, and sometimes they set it up, but you really have to ensure that governance is at the core fabric of how you're actually deploying a technology strategy. And so what do I mean by that? It's the healthy tension of you're trying to democratize the technology so that everybody can use it and go fast. But there's a couple elements of governance that we've put in, which is, we're looking at what are the high impact areas with which we're deploying it. And at the leadership level is we're making sure that these things don't go off in a siloed fashion, so that for the over 120,000 colleagues that work at our company, if I think about internally, does that experience come together, right? Versus, it looking like a hodgepodge of a bunch of different tools and processes that are difficult to navigate, right? The last thing people need is more choice and kind of another thing to remember. And so having that governance, I think, makes sense internally, to think about colleague experience. And then likewise, when we think about the experience for our customers, right? We often talk about the total company value proposition that Thermo Fisher creates to be that trusted partner of end-to-end innovation and productivity that we can drive for them. And we have amazing people in our organization who wake up and think about that every day. So part of my role is I think about how do I tether together the digital strategy that we're deploying from an innovation perspective to really be in lockstep with the strategy that our people are talking about and bringing to our customers on a day-to-day basis. And then the underpinning of all that is responsible AI, right? Is ensuring that every step that you take through both governance as well as tools that are actually, there's a lot of exciting tools that are advancing around the ability to make sure that you're using it responsibly and ethically and kind of aligned, if you will, at the end of the day to the company's values. So that's a lot of work, right? And I think sometimes it's the healthy tension of you want to go fast, but it's super important from my perspective to make sure that you're putting in those guardrails and that it's a very cross-functional team that is kind of overseeing that so that everybody feels an ownership stake in this, right? And I think that at the end of the day is how we think about it.
Can you talk about some of the use cases leveraging AI that excites you most?
Yeah, so when I think about our services, certainly the clinical trial space is one where there's just a tremendous amount of industry excitement, whether it's trying to find the right patients to be part of a clinical trial, the amount of documentation and summarization that can benefit from it, to how you can actually service the patients through that process. There's a tremendous amount of focus and excitement at Thermo Fisher, where how can we lead in partnership with our customers on that journey. And that is a huge amount of time when you think about the overall time and energy and cost to bring a drug to market. The clinical trial space is certainly top of mind for us. Internally, I'm very excited, well, selfishly about software. Just like simple things like what software developer likes to document their code? The answer is none of them. And so what a great way to quickly advance better code, better documentation. You take some of your more junior software developers and instantly make them a lot better. So some of those advancements we see, whether it's software developers, marketeers, people working the call centers. It's this idea of how can you underpin what they do every day, but actually make them better. So that's the way we think about it internally. And then, as far as the customer experience goes, one of the ones we're excited about that we're piloting is bringing AI onto our websites, right? How do you help the customers find the products faster, right? Or if they have, you're on that product page and you have a question, we've implemented tools where they can chat essentially with the product itself to ask questions about maybe use cases or how do I use this product? And that would typically either be something they couldn't get an answer to, or they'd have to call maybe their sales rep or a customer service agent. Now they can get those answers directly online when they're deciding whether or not to buy the product. I mean, it's incredible to think about the number of use cases. So I think actually the biggest thing is how do you make sure that you're focused, right, on a handful so that you can make the biggest impact and go fast. There's a discipline element there too.
Great examples. Thank you for sharing those. And obviously, in many cases, what we're talking about is innovations that your team are helping to drive. And on the topic of innovation, I recall a conversation you and I had a while back where you talked about the importance of empathy in innovation. And I thought that was such an interesting framing. I'd love to have you explain it for our audience, why empathy is such an important aspect to innovation.
Yeah, for me, it's central to how I lead. And it's been a refrain that I constantly remind myself as well as my team on how to be an effective function, which is at the end of the day, we're here to serve the business and make the business go in directions that benefit business, our customers, our shareholders. You can't lose sight of that. Sometimes functions can get so wrapped up in making the perfect function that they lose sight of the fact that they're there to serve the business. So it starts with, your purpose. And when I look at my colleagues who have to lead these incredibly complicated businesses and solve problems every day for their customers, they don't often have time in the day or the mind share to become experts on all of these different technologies that are coming. So I always make sure that when I'm communicating with my teams on, hey, what makes a great IT partner? It starts with empathy. Think about and meet your business partner where they are, right? So you may have some who, by the way, they may wake up every day and think about technology because that could be core to how they run their business, which is great. So meet them where they are. And you may have another individual who is leading a very complicated, scientific business, but that isn't what they wake up and think about every day. And so meet them where they are, right? And work with them from whatever level they are to figure out how to improve their business. And again, deploy the right degree of technology to make their business better. And so that's how we school, if you will, and teach our functional leaders on how to manage within their organization. Start with what the customer wants, then work your way back to what is the business trying to accomplish, then develop empathy on how you need to actually help your customer. In this case, it could be an internal customer on how to develop a good technology underpin strategy.
Yeah, keen insight. I love that approach, and certainly a thread pulled through the conversation more generally in terms of the necessity to know your colleagues, know your customers well enough to understand what it is that they need and then deliver what they need to them. I wanted to ask you also, as you look to the future, Ryan, what trends excite you beyond some of the ones that we've already noted? Anything additional ones that you would underscore?
Yeah, listen, I think, having talked to a lot of industry leaders, one of the insights that I've received is the mistake that enterprise IT often makes when you have a situation like what we're dealing with around artificial intelligence is the technology is moving so fast that what you're deploying is tomorrow's legacy today. And you have to really make sure that you're thinking about where the technology is going so that as you're deploying things, you're doing it in a nimble enough way to take advantage of where this technology is going, not being so fixated on where the technology is today. And so, a few examples of that I think about is, a lot of us, got familiar with OpenAI's ChatGPT platform and began to experiment right away with prompting. And how do we kind of take documentation and summarization and all the great things that it could do. But clearly, it was going to go multimodal, and now we're there, right? And so I'm excited about those opportunities where you start to think about video, speech are all just really outputs, no different than text. So we have to kind of unbox our thinking when it comes to where is the technology going when we're conceiving of solutions and helping those general managers and business leaders on what could be. And just more recently, when I think about chain of thought and reasoning in terms of how the language models are really going to start to solve problems and break them down into smaller increments, it just opens up an unbelievable amount of opportunities in terms of the types of problems that you can bring the technology to. Again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say you have to obviously underpin your responsible AI framework underneath all of that. So you have to be sure that you don't bring things into production that aren't ready, right? But at the same time, you have to have those experiments going so that as the technology matures, you've brought the company and our business leaders along with you, right? And I think that's something that when I look at the trends and when I get excited about these areas, it's how do I make sure that you don't wait all the way until it's matured to begin to have and engage our business in those opportunities. You got to bring them along. You got to bring them along the way. And there's a big element of what we call literacy and change management controls that we're working with our company on as well to make sure that people are preparing themselves for, hey, wow, the work that you used to do this way and maybe the same way the last 25 years is going to fundamentally change. So how do you bring them along when you're talking about these trends? Because some of them are just kind of hard to believe, quite frankly, when you look at it on the surface, and it may not manifest in the way the tools are marketed to you today. But those trends are certainly here, and it's clearly where the R&D in the industry is going. And so you may as well start to plan for what's coming versus just what's here now today.
It's such a keen answer, Ryan. I appreciate that, and it brings to mind my hypothesis anyway for you to let me know whether I've got right or not. 6 years in role, 20 years with the company, you've had a long-term perspective as to technology and its use within your organization, different from colleagues of peers of yours who spend 2 years here, 3 years there, 4 years here, 2 years there. In different organizations in each of these cases. You've had a chance to introduce the state-of-the-art, see it advance, and actually see it erode to the point where it needs to be retired within your setting, and counseled your organization on that very point. It strikes me there are advantages, not that you have a second career that you can compare to where, in fact, you did jump around from role to role across companies, but it strikes me as a great advantage that you have for the way in which your company has, your career has unfolded to provide this sort of longer term perspective that I'm hearing in the way you just responded to my question. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's really, the credit goes to, I think, how the company is operationalized, right? Which is, it is a relentlessly customer focused organization. So we like to think that we have an incredible amount of discipline on how we deploy our capital. And that's been proven over and over with our shareholders. And our IT organization is no different, right? So when we look to deploy our strategies and when we build our budgets and our plan, it really is one where, in lockstep with our finance partners, with our process leaders, with our strategy organization, we try to ensure that really every dollar that we spend is truly aligned to a customer need. And that is both short-term as well as long-term, right? So sometimes you got to make short-term sacrifices, but we're never afraid to look at, what are those long-term investments that we have to make? And increasingly we spend $1.3 billion per year in R&D, which is an industry leader. And increasingly more and more of that is actually technology driven from a software perspective. And so, the opportunity for our organization to help shape that in terms of benefiting customers as well as obviously the things that you traditionally do in an IT organization to support your colleagues, right? We have 120,000 plus of those that we support every single day. But I think it really is just never losing sight of, you're not here to just deploy technology, right? And as much as many people in my organization, that's what they wake up and think about and love, quite frankly. I always say never fall in love with the technology, because what you've deployed may at some point be a legacy, and you gotta have the courage to take it down and start all over if it is in the benefit of furthering the business. And sometimes, by the way, old technology works great, right? If you have a part of the business that's working fine and it's accomplishing what it needs, you don't need to just keep upgrading for upgrade's sake and deploying new technology because it's newer. It really is just staying disciplined on when and why you actually need to deploy the resources of a function.
I wanted to ask you as we close here, Ryan, anything you've recently, I know you're a voracious reader, for example, anything you've recently read or watched or listened to, as the case may be, that you'd recommend to this audience?
I do try to consume as much as I can because it is a fast moving area, whether it's books, podcasts. I try to alternate between somewhat heavy books and maybe something lighter so that I don't totally lose my mind. But when I think about AI and some of the opportunities that are coming, I think it's important to have a future back view, right? And so one of my favorite futurists is Ray Kurzweil, who just wrote The Singularity is Nearer. What I liked about the book in particular was, it's one version of what could happen, but he touches on so many important aspects of where the advancements of the technology are going, the impacts to the human race, right? All the ethics that we have to ensure that we're instilling along the way. And it just seems like, as a conversation, that is very, very important for everybody to be engaged in. And so I love to kind of hear how some people paint the picture of the future, and it just helps shape my thinking to help guide in my role as a leader in my organization. So that's certainly one I would recommend.
Well, thank you for that. And Ryan, thank you more generally for a phenomenal conversation. It's great to understand further the areas that you and the team are focused on, the way in which you are leading the organization, some of the counterintuitive but really powerful insights that you've had that have really shaped the way in which you lead as well. It's been wonderful to speak with you today.
Oh, thanks, Peter. I enjoyed it.